as we continue live, we are in beautiful West Palm Beach, Florida. Now to another critical race right here in the Sunshine State. Senator Marco Rubio has opened up a commanding double-digit lead over Democrat Val Demings. After this strong debate performance, let's take a look.
The extremist on abortion in this campaign is Congresswoman Demings. She supports no restrictions, no limitations of any kind. She voted against she's against a 4-month ban. She voted against a 5-month ban. She supports taxpayer-funded abortion on demand for any reason at any time up until the moment of birth. Because you didn't support a 20-week ban. You didn't support...
Up to the time of viability.
But when is that? That's the vague language they all give. And then they talk about the doctor and the family. Let me tell you who else is in that room, that abortion room. The government is in that room because she brought them in there. She wants the taxpayer to pay for that abortion. That's government involvement. Not just to pay for that abortion, but to pay for them all over the world.
Look, the senator can play national security expert all he wants. I know he needs that for his next presidential run.
Congresswoman, I need to stop you there, and I want to give, because you mentioned the senator, another 30 seconds to the senator.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what she means by play national security expert. I'm the vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee and was the previous chairman of it, so it's actually my job. But my opponent has been in Congress now for half a decade and has never passed a single piece of legislation into law, not one. The only thing she does is vote 100% with Pelosi.
Now, Senator Rubio is right. Val Demings is nothing but a rubber stamp for Nancy Pelosi. By the way, a 100% Joe Biden voter, 100% of the time. Now wants to be a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer. Now, she already supports the Biden agenda 100% of the time, like Joe Biden. She doesn't have fond feelings about half the country. She even campaigned with a far-left activist who actually compared Republican voters to the Taliban and al-Qaeda. Now, Demings also heaped praise on the teachers' union boss who tirelessly worked to keep your kids out of school. She called her, quote, the amazing Randy Weingarten, you know, the teachers' union head. She also praised the left's very thoughtful plan to dismantle and defund the police. That's a genius move. And like every other radical Democrat, she also supports open borders, wants to limit the domestic production of oil and gas, the lifeblood of our economy, through the socialist New Green Deal. During her 5 years in Congress, only 2 of her sponsored bills ever became law, and both renamed post office buildings. Now, in contrast, just the record. Anyway, in contrast, Marco Rubio is one of the most productive, thoughtful, freedom-loving members of the United States Senate. Let's give a warm Florida welcome to Senator Marco Rubio. Anybody that is preparing for a debate, maybe any other candidates, I pray that they watch that debate with you and Val Demings. That's my job. That's what I do. I thought that was a really good, powerful moment for you in the whole debate. I thought she did very poorly. You're both up by double digits. You're both running against candidates that are 100% in support of Joe Biden's policies. I don't think there is a bigger choice election in our lifetime, Senator.
Well, first of all, we're not up by anything because the votes haven't been counted. So it's important everybody get out and we vote and we run through the tape because that's what they want us to do. But I understand what you're saying. And I don't know what Charlie Crist is on because he's the only one in Florida. We were just talking about this a moment ago. He will have lost to me in 2010 and then Rick Scott in 2014 and now to Ron DeSantis. It's a rite of passage.
That's like the trifecta.
And, but he's also the only candidate I know that had, there was three people were introduced on the stage, Charlie Crist, Ron DeSantis, and his fan. And Charlie Crist's fan got its own introduction as well. So the guy's not a serious candidate. But I don't know how you can be with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time like Val Demings is. Pelosi isn't even with Pelosi 100% of the time. So it's a tough thing to do. So anyway.
And by the way, I don't think Joe knows today's Thursday. Ouch, that was mean, right? They're not responsible for what I say. You know, Senator, I look at what's happened to the country, and I was asking the governor about this the last 20 months. My son is here with me tonight. He's 24 years old. He lives in Florida. And I worry about his future. I worry about my daughter's future. She's 21. I worry about everyone in this room, their family, their children and grandchildren's future. I've never seen things get this bad this fast. To me, this is an inflection point for the country. Am I overstating it?
No, I think here's what we need to understand. The same party that's a Democratic Party that, I don't say this with any pleasure, that's controlled by two groups, these laptop liberals and these Marxist misfits. That's the core of the Democratic Party today. Not the voters, not Democratic voters, but the leadership of that party. That's where they take their orders from. And I'll be very blunt. If these people stay in power for another 2 years, they'll destroy the country. If they get their hands on this state or they'll destroy the state. And so, to me, this choice, and I'm glad the governor's here tonight, you know, I always say this to people. People all want to come to America. All these guys like to talk about how terrible America is, but everybody wants to come here. And then the same people say, oh, and by the way, Florida's a terrible place, but they all want to move here. So,
by the way, the greatest moment in COVID were all these Democratic governors and politicians that supported shutdowns in their states that come visit you down here, and they all got caught.
It's a cottage industry. I mean, if I had a dime for every one of the lockdowners who left lockdowns to come to Florida, I'd be a very wealthy man. I mean, this happened over and over again.
They did, and they got caught almost every time.
But that's the thing, though. When your biggest critics, people can posture and they can emote politically and say this stuff, but how do they behave? And if even your worst critics are coming to your state, then you know you must have been doing something right.
I don't know what my favorite was. It was either Gretchen Whitmer, who came and then lied about coming, or AOC that came down and was partying without a mask on. Oh, I see we have a lot of AOC fans in the crowd.
But my favorite moment is when you talk to one of these Democratic politicians, and invariably it comes down to, oh, yeah, I've been down to Florida a bunch. Oh, yeah, why? He goes, my mom lives in Boca. So
that's a great line. You know, let me look at the other side of this. Everyone's talking about a wave election. Senator, you said something I hope everybody heard loud and clear. There are a lot of polls, but there's only one poll that matters, and that's on Election Day. When we can, now, many of you can vote early in Florida. You've perfected the system down here, thankfully. It's no longer 2000 or 2016. But it's so critical because if, let's say, the Democrats took over the Senate and they had a majority, I don't think you'd disagree with me, they'd eliminate the legislative filibuster.
Correct.
They'd pack the courts. They'd make D.C., Puerto Rico statehood a done deal because they think that would guarantee them 4 Senate seats in perpetuity. They would continue down this path of new Green Deal radicalism. And if that happened, I don't know if we'd ever dig ourselves out of it.
No, they would also take over our election system. They pretty much said they want to do that. Val Demings says she also wants the federal government to potentially take over our property insurance, which is, you can just imagine. Maybe that's what the 87,000 IRS agents will do, is run the insurance company. But I mean, the list goes on of the parade of horribles of things they would do. Look, if they were in power, I'm convinced of this now. If they had a filibuster, no filibuster, whatever, and they had been in charge during the COVID, they would have locked down the country. They would have done to the country what they did to New York, what they did to California, what they did to Illinois. That's what they would have done. In fact, Val Demings has said as much, and I think both Demings and Christ are on record as late as I think last summer asking for another shutdown in this state. They would have spent $4-something trillion. They tried to, and even in their infrastructure bill, they brag about only a quarter of that money went to infrastructure. The rest of it went to take on very serious problems like, you know, racist roads and discriminatory trees and whatever else they can think of. And so, look, I'm sorry. I hate to say this about my fellow Americans. These people are out of their minds, and they cannot be allowed to be near power.
You know, it raises the bottom line. Newt Gingrich defines it really well. The night he became Speaker, the Republicans were out of power 40 years. I was the MC of that event. I was a local radio host in Georgia at the time. How do you reconcile capitalism versus socialism? How do you reconcile defund no bail versus law and order? How do you reconcile domestic energy production and energy dependence? How do you reconcile capitalism, socialism, put all these issues together? They're very different competing visions. To me, the only answer is one side's going to win, and it better be our side. I don't see any middle ground here.
Yeah, I mean, just look at how these states have performed, like, since I've been governor. You have states like California and New York. People are fleeing those states. They're not safe. They tax, lockdown, all those other things.
You're not giving Gavin Newsom enough credit. He's the first governor in the history of California that had a net exodus of it out of his state, not a net increase in it.
But you see, though, the Florida blueprint has worked. I mean, people, just by bringing their wealth, their visitation, moving here. But what they want to do is take those failed blue state models, and they want to force that over the entire country. So they want to do things, like Marco mentioned the elections. They want to outlaw voter ID in every election in our country. Can you imagine what happened? They want to mandate. In Florida, since I've been governor, we banned ballot harvesting in Florida, but they would federalize it and they would require ballot harvesting. And so I agree with Marco in the sense of it's not just maybe we disagree on taxes, maybe we disagree on welfare spending. These differences are fundamental. It's about really what it means to be an American and what are our foundational principles. And the left wing of our country has departed from the principles that have made the country great.
They're not. You can't reconcile these two visions. One side has to win in the future. There was a time, Democrats are a little left, Republicans are to the right, but we both operated like in the same universe. Now, what's happened here is that these people, they live in these little bubbles, like the laptop liberals. They live in these little bubbles. The Marxist misfits, there's no hope for. But the laptop liberals, they live in these little bubbles where they have a lot of power, and everyone they know is just like them. And so they have these ideas, and they're immune from the consequences, okay? Since Joe Biden has been president, 4.4, almost 4.5 million people have entered this country illegally, okay? The governor flew 48 of them one day to make a point to Martha's Vineyard. Yeah. 48. They arrive, the state of Massachusetts immediately declares a state of emergency. 48 people. They mobilize 100 and something National Guard troops, 2-to-1 ratio. Then they do what all these laptop liberals do. They stage this thing at a church where they show, look, we're feeding them, we're giving them toys, and then they deport them to Cape Cod 24 hours later when no one was looking.
Less than 24 hours.
They live immune from because it's not their schools, it's not their hospitals, it's not their cities that are being overcrowded. And you know where they're moving to? They're moving to immigrant communities and Hispanic communities and states like Florida and Texas and Arizona who have to share all the burden because these laptop liberals, they live immune from the consequences of their craziness. And that's why they're that wild.
I'll tell you, one of the areas that you're uniquely qualified to talk about is the area of national security. I am very concerned. I don't think Joe Biden garners any respect from world leaders, hostile regimes like Vladimir Putin in Russia, President Xi in China, the mullahs in Iran. The Saudis mocked him, made fun of him, denied his request to increase oil production. As a matter of fact, reduced it and then exposed that he wanted to collude with them to delay the announcement of their reduction in the production of oil. By the way, if it was a Republican, they'd be put in jail, they'd be investigated, probably impeached.
Well, as you know,
I'm worried about the national security side of all of this because we see what's happening in Ukraine, and I believe President Xi, when he says that he wants to, quote, reunify with Taiwan, it's not reunify. He wants to take over Taiwan.
Well, to be fair to Biden, okay, as we all know, Saudi oil is cleaner for the environment than American oil is, right? So,
By the way, headline tomorrow, Marco Rubio says Saudi oil is cleaner.
So, according to Biden, so my solution is just to pump American oil, put a sticker that says Saudi and confuse him, and maybe he'll be for it. So, but going back to the point that you're making, yeah, so let me give you one example, okay? We have, and I love our military, but it has civilian leadership. And so you look at, it's embarrassing. You look at their Twitter page and they've like video after video about the proper use of pronouns. No, you need to be focused on how do we blow up Chinese aircraft carriers if they ever attack us. So of course they don't respect the guy. They don't respect him. And why would they? And so I think they view him as incompetent. And then I think you see, okay, if you're bad to America and mean to Biden, he'll try to be nice to you. You're Iran, he'll want to do a deal. You're Venezuela, he'll want to do a deal. But China, John Kerry, who's still around, he's like the Charlie Crist at the federal level. He's still around, and he wants to do this climate deal with
We're going to
China.
take this show on the road. You know?
And so, China's sitting there saying, we're going to take these guys to the cleaner. We're going to take these guys, and that's what they're doing. So you're absolutely right. It's dangerous. Yeah. It's reckless. And the China threat is the threat of the 21st century. Either they will be the world's most powerful country or we will. And I promise you, a world where China is the most powerful country in the world is not a good world. It is not the one I want to leave my kids.
I hope everybody's listening, because that is a real clear present danger for the country. All right, we're just getting started. We'll take a break. More with Governor DeSantis, more with Senator Rubio. When we come back, Senator Rick Scott will join us right here live on stage. Hannity on the road live from Palm Beach. Thank you.